Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now in our 24th episode of 2022. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank our sponsors of Fiber for Breakfast, including our gold sponsors, CHR Solutions, Millennium, and Plume, and our silver sponsor, Graybar. Last week in Washington, our good friend Chris McLean, the acting RUS administrator, shared that over the next several months, RUS will work to complete its current $1.15 billion Reconnect funding round. Publish the rules for the next founding run. That was going to include $2 billion from the Infrastructure Act, and then it will start the application process for that round. RUS received 305 applications seeking a total of more than $4.8 billion in funding in the current round. RUS could tap into additional funding from other sources to add to the $1.15 billion available. Though some applicants are seeking funding for wireless projects, most of the applications are for fiber projects, with many applications from small telcos, rural electric co-ops, and larger telecommunication providers and cable companies have filed applications. Also last week, I was at Ohio State University, go Buckeyes, with Lieutenant Governor John Husted and Eric Leach from the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation as we kicked off the Ohio Broadband and 5G Sector Partnership. We have a very aggressive agenda to train fiber optic technicians and an effort to accelerate the deployment of broadband and 5G across the state of Ohio. This week, the entire fiber industry is in Nashville at Fiber Connect 2022. Our attendance has been amazing, with growing over 50% beyond our previous record. Today's closing summit is with keynotes such as our good friend Chris Alley from the University of Virginia and author of Farm Fresh Broadband. Love Chris. I'm looking forward to his keynote. After Nashville, our next fiber conference will be in San Jose, Costa Rica on July 11th and 12th. And then we'll be holding our fiber workshops at Copper Mountain Resort in Colorado on August 23rd, and in Columbus, Ohio on November 3rd. That brings us today's Fiber for Breakfast session, where we're going to be focused on the power of fiber. Power utilities build fiber for the greater good. But before I formally introduce today's guests, I would like to introduce Trish Ehlers from our team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you, Gary, and good morning to everyone who's joined us today. Before I go over a few logistical items, I'd like to once again thank our Fiber for Breakfast sponsors, gold sponsors CHR Solutions, Millennium and Plume, and silver sponsor Graybar. Now, if you all would just keep in mind that everyone is in listen mode only. To ask a question, just type it into the question box located within your control panel on the right side of your screen. We will host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's session. This presentation is being recorded and will be available to members only on FBA's website within 24 hours. You can find the recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. At the conclusion of the presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a very brief feedback survey. If you could take a minute to do so, we really appreciate your input. I'll pass it back to Gary now to introduce our panelists and get us started this morning. Gary?
Thanks, Trish, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week at Fiber for Breakfast, we met with Jamie Linderman from Omdia and discussed how 1 gig became the global broadband standard. Jamie's research showed that 88% of network operators in North America today are offering a gigabit or higher service at sub $100 pricing. Even more interesting is that fiber networks today are being built for 10 gig symmetric service, and we'll soon be seeing 25 gig and 50 gig PON. In today's session, we're going to be doing a roundtable discussion on the power of fiber. Power utilities build fiber for the greater good, with the chair of the Fiber Broadband Association's Power Utility Roundtable, Pete Hoffswell from Holland Board of Public Works, along with Fiber Broadband Association's past chair, Katie Espeseth of EPB in Chattanooga, and George Stegall from Alabama Power. Pete Hoffswell was the Superintendent of Broadband Services at Holland Board of Public Works, and he's responsible for all aspects of fiber and network services. He also serves as the Fiber Broadband Association's chair of the Public Utility Roundtable. Katie Espeseth is the Vice President of New Products at EPB and served as the Fiber Broadband Association's chair in 2020 and 2021. And George Stegall is the Connectivity Manager at Alabama Power, which provides service to 1.5 million homes and businesses and industries in the southern 2/3 of Alabama. So welcome, Pete, Katie, and George. And to get things kicked off, why don't we start with some opening statements from each of our panelists, and we'll begin with you, Pete.
Thanks very much, Gary, and it's great to be here with you today, and Katie and George as well. Greetings from Holland, Michigan. We are in West Michigan, along the shores of Lake Michigan, where we provide electric, water, wastewater, and broadband services as utilities to the Holland area. As Gary was showing, the Michigan, we are over here along the western side, along the shore of Lake Michigan, straight across from Detroit. It's over here. So it's a very exciting time for us. We've been building fiber for 30 years in Holland, starting with building that fiber to serve our power and water utilities to give enhanced connectivity for monitoring and control of those systems. Fiber has allowed us to take our utility from being a reliable and efficient system to being an even better one by having that solid connectivity. And we'll be talking, all of us, a little bit about the value of fiber to a utility. When we started the fiber, we decided any excess capacity in our network would be made available to our community. Being a municipal utility, this is in our DNA, and we did that and have provided lit services and dark fiber services to our greater community for 30 years now. So exciting times. And I'll pass it back to you, Gary. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Pete. And Katie.
So good morning. Thanks for asking us to join the discussion this morning. Similar to how Pete described their role, EPB is very similar. We're a municipally owned electric power distributor located in the southeastern corner of Tennessee. We pass about 185,000 homes in our footprint. And really, our decision to build a fiber optic network stemmed from at the beginning of in early 2000s of us asking the question, how can we really deliver more value for our community? Our mission's just similar to most power to distributors, and it's about really enhancing the quality of life of the folks who live in our footprint. And we feel like economic development is at the very heart of being able to do that. So we began looking at technologies. How could we do that? And fiber was really where we landed on being able to provide more reliable power and building an economic engine for businesses in our footprint. So that's how we made the decision to build the fiber optic network. Today, we have about 11,000 miles of fiber in our footprint. We serve about 125,000 customers with our broadband services. So would we do it again? Absolutely.
Thanks, Katie. And then to our big operator, George with Alabama Power.
Hey, Gary, Katie, Pete, good to be with y'all as well. George Stegall, I'm the Connectivity Manager for Alabama Power. We started our fiber program. We've been in it for 30 years, Pete, similar to you, but typically from generation unit to substation. And we had not moved into more of the distribution space until 3 or 4 years ago, studying it closely, working a lot with EPB Chattanooga. They were very helpful in explaining the electrical benefits that we see and experience today where we have our fiber networks. So our build profile is twofold. We have an intentional long haul program. That's not unique. There's many power companies doing that. What is more unique is how deep our fiber gets to our network. So what I was saying earlier, where now we'll go substation to not the side of the home, but down our primary lines, down feeders to the front of the neighborhood is sort of the way I would explain it. In some instances that is on premise, but typically it's there's another last mile component to it to actually get to the side of the home connection. So we have a robust program. We have 14 active and or finalized fiber distribution networks. We have hundreds of miles of long haul that are finished, and then hundreds more under construction. So we're in about year 3 of a 10-year build out cycle. So very intentional on fiber, very intentional really on the full connectivity gamut. When we looked at the grid of the future, similar to what Katie was saying, we already knew it, but as you study it, there are increasingly positive and strong devices that sectionalize the grid to help us manage outages, trouble on the line. But what you also see is you need communication between a central location and that grid device. And so making sure that we have that robust connectivity medium, be it fiber or wireless, we have both. It's not just a single. However, the fiber program is fairly robust and newer.
So how would you guys describe, so you got kind of a municipal, with Pete, and then a larger city with Katie, and then kind of the whole state or nearly the state for Alabama. So how would you describe to our audience kind of what's similar between, there's, I guess, George, you do both generation and some distribution, and then Pete, you and Katie do distribution. Pete, you do also water and other utilities as well. Maybe you can help describe for our audience. I'll let you guys kind of all just jump in and describe, how you're the same and how you're different.
Sure. Well, I can start. And, being a power utility provider, we're all using that fiber infrastructure at the core to operate the utilities that we provide. And we are a power distribution. We're also a power producer. So we have a nice power plant, water treatment plant, water reclamation plant. All these systems have core technologies in them. We call it SCADA, that is operating and controlling that system. All 3 of our entities are going to have that. Fiber is absolutely essential for very reliable, high performance connectivity for all that equipment. Hey, if we lose contact with one of our substations and the power goes down, that's a bad day in our town. And fiber helps us keep that up.
So I would add, we're very similar to that as well. But the cost of power outages to our communities is tremendous. And the cost to power outages prior to building this network in Chattanooga, we worked with DOE. There's lots of calculators that are available. But we could document the cost of power outages in Chattanooga was nearly $100 million a year. And that's not cost to us as the utility. It's cost to our customers. It's lost productivity. It's the cash register or the point of sale terminals not working and that sort of thing. So we realized that was something we could really, if we could improve reliability and cut those outage minutes and outage instances, we could really provide a huge benefit to our community. So looking back now, 10 years after launch, we can document a significant improvement in power reliability. In fact, we've reduced 65% of power outage instances with about 52% reduction in outage minutes. So going back to that $100 million, that's nearly $50 million of really wealth or productivity that we've returned to the community, not to us, but to the community, which is why we're here and what we're here to do, and that's to serve the community. So, those numbers scale to communities all over the country, whether you're small or whether you're large. Any bite you can take out of those power outages is extremely important. And fiber is truly the only technology that gives you the communication speed, the low latency, everything that you need to really make that effective. So we haven't even touched on what it does to bring access to high-speed broadband to your residents and to your businesses. But just looking at the power savings alone is worth building a network. We firmly believe that's the case.
Great.
I can echo that from Alabama Power standpoint. We see both of those points in terms of outages and the speed at which we can now recover from an outage. In a lot of instances where we have a full fiber deployment with the reclosers and the artificial intelligence that sits on top of those, outages can happen and a consumer doesn't even experience it because it cycles 6/60ths of a second. So it's very quick. And then you can also design the grid to be much smaller, 300 customers for a given outage, as opposed to 1,500 or more that a single squirrel or a single pole that jumps out in front of a car could impact. So we certainly see those same two benefits. The other aspect that we see from just a large, I think it's 45,000 square miles of a territory that we serve, a lot of our local offices are relying on the local internet. And so the systems that we have from a corporate standpoint, some of our field engineers can't even run those systems because the internet connection in those local areas is so poor. So there's some very basic, just central elements to it. And it's really a platform. This is the most beneficial of, we see and experience new elements of what the fiber is providing, maybe not daily, but probably monthly. And so it's significant to know that you do not have a limitation from a communication standpoint. So whatever innovative technology that comes out there, we don't have to have the fear of, well, we don't have the speeds to be able to communicate with that device. That's gone. And so that's a huge future-proofing simplification for future innovations.
So it sounds like that the initial driver for fiber in the utilities was really to strengthen and modernize the electric grid to really provide more stable, reliable power and reduce outages, reduce loss and cost to ratepayers and the community at large. And last time I was in Beirut, they have a very unstable power grid, and when you're sitting there all day long with brownouts, and the more rich people can have generators at their apartments and things like that, but you don't realize how disruptive life is when you're just constantly, it's just like clean water. You take it for granted until you're at a place that doesn't have reliable clean water. So just having that clean energy and be able to have that reliable. And so then it sounds like then you really saw a community need to be able to, what helped you determine to come out with broadband services. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. And this little conversation is really felt, I feel that segue moving from using fiber as a power utility mechanism to providing broadband services as a utility in our community. We consider broadband service a essential utility. Just as we talked about, if the power goes out, you can't run your business because the cash register is offline. If the internet service serving your business goes out, you can't run the cash register because the internet's offline. We have restaurants downtown that have a momentary internet outage. It's a major panic. They can't, what are they going to do? So it's an absolutely essential service, just like electricity and water is today. And we treat it that way within our organization. Katie, I know that you've seen this in your town too.
Yeah, I think it's the same across the country, really, whether you're rural or urban. The lack of access to high-speed broadband is well documented across the country. And Chattanooga was no different than many, many other spots. When we began to look at what services were available to our customers, we realized, hey, we were very much underserved. And so using that same fiber optic network, we layered on access to high-speed internet. And we were early in this process, and so we worked with some economists and folks at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga to help us project what would happen if we built this infrastructure. And we really, at that time, we were hoping for a 35% take rate when we built the network. We've asked that same economist to go back and document some of the benefits to the community. And his study has been published and is talked about quite a bit, but we can document, or he can document, and his team, about $2.7 billion of economic impact to the Chattanooga area. It's not to EPB, but it's across the board. It's smart grid savings. It's about new companies coming to Chattanooga. It's about entrepreneurial ventures being launched. It's about 9,500 new jobs. So it's across the board. Been a tremendous benefit to the community. And what do utilities do? We build infrastructure, and we do that really well. But communities collapse around this infrastructure, and they really make it what it is. And they're the ones that create the economic benefits. So while we think the fiber optic network is at the very foundation, it's really about what really smart people do in each of our communities to find those applications and really deliver for the community.
You know, it's amazing, you know, so Chattanooga being the first gigabit community in the world, you know, putting Chattanooga on the world stage. It was interesting because I know, being just down the road from Chattanooga, that, you know, that's our mayor is like, people are moving to Chattanooga now. I mean, you know, we saw this, that, you know, things like your incubators, or what can you do with a gig, and all kinds of new businesses come into Chattanooga and really transform that. And even then becoming a 10 gig city. In the research, you know, last week's Fiber for Breakfast, Jamie Linderman had basically said that, you know, operators are offering a gigabit, and they're going to offer 10 gig, and they're going to keep offering higher and higher services. And not necessarily because people need that, but people will switch to an operator that offers the highest service because they believe that company is on the leading edge, and that's going to be a more reliable and more future-proof operator. One of the things I also love about Chattanooga, Katie, is, you know, I spend a lot of time up on the COE, and everybody from Chattanooga always has glowing things to say about EPB. And when I look at the net promoter scores in the telecommunications industry, they are at the bottom of the barrel. I mean, they are the lowest. And fiber operators are the best of the worst, but it's great to see that everybody, you know, loves EPB, and I'm sure that's the same in Holland. George, so kind of moving to now a big IOU, how are you guys looking at fiber? I think it's more middle mile, right? Or?
Yes. So our fiber journey was, how can we make the electrical grid better? And this I mentioned this earlier, but the platform element is not necessarily the way that an engineer is. We try to do things that are the most effective for an electrical use. And so when we started thinking and talking about fiber, it certainly is, you know, fiber is the best communication medium. But the people can ride it to deliver broadband speed was the innovative step for us. That's outside of our scope. That's not what we do. Frankly, it's still not what we do. But what we do is build infrastructure, to what Katie said, and that same infrastructure is used for multi-purpose. You know, we're talking internet right now, but in probably 5-10 years, we're going to be talking telemedicine and doctors being connected directly to patients, and it won't even hit the, you know, a traditional ISP potentially. So it's a platform. And so that's the way we think about it from an electrical standpoint. And then from the consumer standpoint, it's really the same future platform, that there's going to be a lot of smart people that do a lot of interesting and cool things and are enabled by the infrastructure. So that's really the way we approach and look at it and think about it. And so our role we enter into partnerships in those 14 markets that I mentioned. 7 of them we have active partnerships with. The other 7 are in more rural areas and are harder to find those partners. So very interested and excited to see what the infrastructure bill is going to do in terms of enabling business cases for some areas that did not have traditional telecom business cases pencil. So we're very excited to see that. And we have seen that. You see it, and we're very good and understand sort of that depending on the demographics that the telecoms look at, we can tell, hey, we're going to be able to find a partner. The median incomes are at this level, the poverty rates are at this level. We know that that's the thresholds that they'll hit and bite. And so to see the government entity step in to try to lower that to get to the hardest places to reach, we're excited both about our infrastructure being utilized to its fullest extent, and then also to see the partners be able to come in and create business cases and develop change in those neighborhoods, those communities as well.
So from what you guys described, I mean, there's over 3,300 electric utility companies in the U.S., and of those, there's 950 rural electric co-ops. So why wouldn't all these utility companies be offering broadband, either dark fiber and middle mile, or being able to actually have residential broadband? Are they all going to be operating, or what's the pushback? Where are we on having every utility have a broadband program?
So I can jump in and answer this. So from my seat, my experience is there's a fear of technology that we don't understand it, we don't know it. What is GPON? What is XPS GPON? There's all these new levels of technology that are coming out, and from an electrical entity, that is challenging. It's also, in some instances, you're entering into a competitive landscape where we in the electrical context, we don't compete on the residential level, and so those two elements are big. I see and sense and believe that what we're going to see is a decoupling of service and infrastructure. We've already seen it, and we're going to continue to see more of it, where Google Fiber came in and started building in a lot of different markets, and they were a big disruptor, and it was very exciting to see it. It was very interesting. And then as you kind of look back and kind of business case out what happened, what was challenging? The construction. The construction was extremely difficult for a lot of reasons. Some of the rules, and from a pole attachment standpoints, the incumbents can control when and where you can attach, or the process allows them to control it. And so the importance and ability to go and construct and build infrastructure in the right way at the right price points that allow those business cases to pencil in less dense areas are increasingly important. And then that service, it's capital intensive to be able to go find and win those customers when you're having to rely on your own balance sheet to be able to go win those customers. But if you, the infrastructure entity, Alabama Power, can enable someone to extend, do not take on dilutive capital to where they can still go pursue the market and don't have to dilute shareholders, that's going to be transformative. It's going to be innovative, and we're seeing it. I think we're going to see more of it. The infrastructure bill points towards more of an open access model. So that's from our chair. It's the risk of technology that is a challenge. It's that competitive landscape that is a challenge, and it's this evolving marketplace. But what I see and sense is the decoupling of an infrastructure play and a services play is the future.
Yeah, it's funny. My friend Jay Stowe once told me that he runs the power utility, so by definition he's risk averse, and so I can see where the utility guys probably are not the first guys running out, but the ones who have, like Katie at EPB and Pete, you guys have really seen tremendous success for you and your community. So Pete, as the chair of the Public Utility Roundtable, what are kind of the big topics that you guys, I mean, it's the fastest growing roundtable discussion we have at the Fiber Broadband. It seems to be really doing great. So what are the big topics that get discussed?
Yeah, Gary, the Power Utilities Roundtable meets once a month. We meet through a video conference very similar to this to share our ideas, ask questions, and get answers. About half the folks are running fiber networks in one way or another, and the other half are considering it or just beginning a project, and they're well on their way. They have a lot of questions. So it's a great information sharing group. That's been very beneficial. We spent about half of our time talking about funding opportunities, of course, because IIJA has really brought that to the forefront of the broadband industry as a whole. How are we going to get this out, particularly for the rural power providers out there, the co-ops that are trying to figure out how to add this new utility into their mix. And the other half of the time is really operations and maintenance. How do you get this thing up and running? How do you keep it running? How do you make a value proposition for your community that's going to work for them? And how are you going to build a sustainable infrastructure? So it's a lot of boots on the ground and in the mud and figuring it out. And it's been very exciting sessions. We're thinking about moving from an hour to an hour and a half because the conversation keeps blowing right through our hour session. So
it'll be like our public officials roundtable that's supposed to be an hour and a half and goes for about 2.5 hours.
yes, exactly.
It's great. It's great information. So thanks for leading that. So everyone, I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your schedule. I hope that we can educate more utility operators on the benefits. It sounds like from your experience that there's huge power efficiency benefits to your ratepayers and your communities, in addition to the broadband infrastructure for connecting your community, as well as public safety and even preparing for 5G. So that's fantastic. So thanks to you guys. I also want to thank everybody for joining us today. Next week, we're going to get together on talking about fiber connecting the dots, our post-show recap with Julie Kunstler, the chief analyst, and Jamie Linderman, the principal analyst at Omdia. So they are we have over 52 press and analysts at our event this week, and they are two of our key analysts that are going to be discussing the hottest topics and the key insights and biggest takeaways from Fiber Connect event this week. So you're not going to want to miss that. We'll see you guys next Wednesday. Thanks all.
Thank you. Have a great day.